All right, it is Thursday, August 10th, 2023, and you are listening to the MMA Eco Live podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Chris Presnell, owner of MMA Ecosystem, also work for Tapology. I've worked as a manager and for a lot of different websites. I've worked, where have I worked? Sportskeeda, MMA Sucka, All Star, and then, of course, write for myself at MMA Ecosystem. But happy to have you joining me today. And this weekend is a little bit lighter of an Asian MMA schedule. Of course, I'll get to everything that's on the calendar and highlight a couple things, a couple gyms here and there. But yeah, and then once we get through that, we will get to your questions. So you can go ahead and drop those questions in the chat, and I will get to those. Probably since we have a little bit lighter of a schedule today, we'll have a little bit more time for questions. So anything that is on your mind related to Asian MMA, UFC, anything at all, nothing is off limits, but please keep it kind and civil to your fellow question askers. And yeah, let's get into it. If you have not already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And that really helps me out. I'm really trying to hit this benchmark of 1,000 subscribers as soon as I can to monetize the channel. That would be great. I do have in the works, hopefully two, at the very least one video before Zhang Weili makes her title defense next Saturday. The first video that hopefully should be out tomorrow is sort of a video that honestly is inspired by a lot of the questions that you all asked me about Zhang Weili's training. I've sort of made an all-encompassing video about her training philosophy and basically built out a timeline of everywhere that she's trained, everyone that she's trained with, to kind of see what's her style, and then give a little bit of critique on like, what are the advantages of this? What are the disadvantages of it? Is this something that other MMA fighters could do? Because it is a little bit different than what we usually see in the industry. So I get into a lot of that and really think that it'll resonate with a lot of people. And then if I am able to get to it, I will also put out kind of a prediction video for Zhang versus Lemos and try to do, it's not going to be like a Dan Hardy video where I'm breaking down every single little foot motion, but hopefully something just kind of brief that gives you a narrative of what we're looking at going into this fight, a couple things to look for from both fighters, hopefully in a way that's both has some depth to it, but also accessible and isn't going to take up a 30-minute block out of your day. So look for that next week. And yeah, excited for that fight. It is rapidly approaching. Before we know it, we'll have this great card on our hands, which has seen a couple changes. It was yesterday that we got the replacement fight of Neil Magny hopping in to fight Ian Machado Gary. We've had Song Yadong step out. We've got Henry Cejudo stepping out. So some big changes, but overall still a very good card. They've still got the two title fights in place, so that's a big plus. But yeah, let's get into the Asian MMA schedule this weekend. A very light weekend overall. Of course, you can always count on one championship for having their Friday fights card, which usually has two MMA events or two MMA fights on that. So I'm going to get to that since that is tomorrow here in a little over 12 hours. So this one in particular, they're not always worth for me highlighting the MMA fights on these cards on this show, but tomorrow's card has two fights that I'm really interested in, hoping to even get up early and watch those fights. So the reason which is that they are both fights are two Asian fighters against each other. So I will show you my screen here and take a look at some of these fighters, because honestly, all of them are pretty good prospects. Like literally all four of the fighters on in these two MMA fights. So you've got Sanlang Gashi fighting David Bangwegwe and Noel Granjin fighting Kim So-yul. So we've got China versus Philippines and Thailand versus Korea. Although I believe Grandjean also represents the Netherlands as well. So I was really happy to see Sanlang Gushi on this card. He was supposed to fight at Niza and actually fight for a title earlier this year, had to drop out of that fight. But he really is one of Wolf Fight's best prospects coming up. Usually fights in the strawweight division, and he will fight in one championship strawweight division, although that is up 10 pounds to 125 pounds. But yeah, great to have him on their roster. One of the better Chinese fighters that they've brought in a long time. And dare I say, one of the best Asian fighter signings that they've had in a long time. He has a 14-1 record, and I'm not sure exactly how old he is, but I gotta think he's really, really young. Let's just see how long he has been fighting. He has been fighting as a pro since 2016. So if I'm just guessing, he was probably in his mid to upper teens at that time, and by now is probably in his early 20s. So he has been fighting for a long time, pretty much exclusively for WLF, which at the time he was fighting for them was giving pretty much the best competition that he could find in China. Not all of these are super high quality wins, which is why I think there's maybe not as much hype behind his one championship debut. But he's got a couple okay wins on there. His only loss to looks like a Russian fellow in 2019. Of course, that guy was 7-0 at the time. But yeah, like I said, he was supposed to fight in Niza against Diaz Aaron Gaipov earlier in March this year. Had to drop out of that fight. But in a way, I was a little bit disappointed that his signing doesn't get as much hype as maybe it would a couple years ago. I was just thinking back to when his teammate Banma Duoji was signed 3 years ago or so. That seemed like a pretty big deal, and I saw a lot of promotion for Banma's debut. I think he was maybe 13-0 at the time, so kind of similar record to Sanlang Gushi. But I don't know. It's like with the one Friday Fights cards, if you're an MMA fighter, you're basically getting zero. You're getting zero promotion going into the fight. And part of that is just because the contracts for these Friday Fights cards are usually one fight contracts. So they're not really going to spend a lot of time promoting a fighter that is potentially only going to be around for one fight, right? We've seen a lot of fighters just fight one time and then fight elsewhere. You get Peter Daniso. He's one of those guys from Thailand that fought once and then was picked up by Road to UFC. So yeah, that is definitely one weakness that I've seen from this Friday Fights system, is that it's a lot harder to promote the MMA fighters or really any of the fighters. But since the fight cards are usually announced week of the fight, there's just not much ability to do much promoting of anybody. So that's a little bit of a shame to me. I really wish that I don't see what the liability behind announcing these fight cards are sooner. When I was working as a manager, I managed a guy that fought on one of these Friday Fights cards, and we knew about the fight and signed the contract like over a month in advance. It wasn't like this was a last minute deal. So I don't know what the beef is behind not releasing these cards sooner, but Sanlang Gushi going to be fighting another really good prospect in David Bangwegwe. Bangwegwe has been in the one championship system for a good while. Let's look down at his record, and he came up through URCC, top Filipino promotion, and then fought twice for one Warrior Series, and then once for the one Friday Fight Show, where he fought a guy with a really good record in 16-3, Marcos Paulo Amarai, back in April. So this is a really big test for Sanlang Gushi, and also a good test for David Bangwegwe. If Bangwegwe is able to beat Sanlang Gushi, I would think that there's a good chance we may see him move to the main one championship shows. So that's kind of the model, is like give these fighters a test run before putting them on the main one championship shows, signing them to longer contracts. So definitely, like, the winner of this fight, you could definitely see in bigger fights in the future on main like fight night cards. So that's that fight. I don't really know a lot about Banguegue's skills to really be able to give you a breakdown, but just kind of interested to see how the fight plays out. And then the other fight is also a really good one. Top Korean prospect against a top Thai prospect. Noelle Grandjean looked great when she made her one championship debut against Leah Bivens a little bit ago. Stopped her with strikes, and she fights out of Tiger Muay Thai. And Kim So-yeol also won her Friday Fights debut, and I believe won by some form of choke, right? Won by a guillotine choke against Morgane Manfredi. Of course, not the best competition there, but if she can beat Noelle Grandjean, definitely ready for that christening of a top prospect. So yeah, really looking forward to that fight, and that should be good. I want to lean Grandjean on that, but we need to see more from her as well. Let's take a look. Gosh, she is so strong. Kind of flexing in that photo. So she has not really, this is a big step up for her as well. Looks like she's got some Muay Thai experience, but really no fighters with really notable records before this fought I guess she fought for Netherlands in her debut levels fight is a Dutch promotion. But yeah, only a little over 2 years as a pro. Leah Bivens, you see that October of last year. So it's been almost a year since we have seen Grandjean, and she's been grinding away at Tiger Muay Thai. Doesn't bear well for Kim So-yeol. So also another great fight. Okay, so that is one Friday Fights. Goes down tomorrow from Lumpini Stadium in the U.S. early in the morning, prime time in Thailand. So that's that fight. Let's hop over. I believe only one other Asian MMA promotion having an event this weekend, at least one that I'm going to cover, and that is One Pride. This is their monthly live show. So this goes down, I think this show is from Bandung, Indonesia. It's not in their usual spot in Jakarta. So let me share my screen. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. There's really only one fight that I want to highlight here. But yeah, they've got their live show tomorrow, 2 title fights. And the fight that I want to highlight here is Gugun Guzman defending his bantamweight championship against Franz Sorman. You may recognize Guzman from the Road to UFC. Since then, he has gone back to One Pride and reclaimed his belt. And his opponent is an interesting one in Franz Sorman. You see the discrepancy in records there. Franz Sorman was brought to the U.S. earlier this year to take part in the Cage Warriors Academy. So he was with all those Indonesian fighters in San Diego, training at Studio 504 under the watch of Graham Boylan, Mark Fiore. And they set him up in a Cage Warriors fight this spring against a guy named James Settle. Now, James Settle would eventually win the fight, I believe, by ground and pound in the second round, but Franz definitely had his moments in the fight, ultimately just kind of got out-wrestled, overpowered, and lost by TKO. But so he's immediately gone back to One Pride, and he is thrown right into a title fight, which is really an interesting move. There must be a lot of hope that, or some kind of deal that this guy can be really something special. So he's going from one big test to another, and if he were to beat Gugun Guzman, he'd be automatically shooting up the Indonesian prospect list for sure. So I will definitely be tuning in for this fight in particular. I tried to see if Sorman, I follow him on Instagram to see if he has been training in Indonesia or if he has or if he's gone back to Studio 504 in San Diego. Kind of hard to tell, but not really sure how those contracts work out with the Cage Warriors Academy. If it's like you keep winning, you just stay here for an indefinite amount of time, or if he decided got to go back to my roots. So that's a fight I'm interested in. Guzman, decent grappler, decent striker, not blow your pants off at either one, but pretty good at both. And He's 33 years old, so he's quite a bit older than Sorman. So that's a fight I will definitely be watching this weekend. All right, so with that to say, I think that's just about it. I did see there's another, believe it or not, the Torch Festival in Sichuan province among the people is still going on. Something I talked about a couple weeks ago when there's a lot of Unwell Fight guys that competed at an MMA event surrounding that celebration. But there's another event going on. Apparently that festival is still going on. There's one going in a township called Mianing in Sichuan province. They've got an event, and the only MMA fight that I can see on that event is a guy named Li Muha, who I believe he got pretty far in the JCK tournament 2 years ago. I thought that he was done with MMA. I chatted with him briefly, and it sounded like he may retire, but I guess he is training again, and he's fighting in this promotion or in this kind of one-time cultural celebration. And he is fighting. He's had 2 opponent changes, but now he's fighting a Mongolian guy named forget his name. I just added it to Tapology today because I just saw the opponent change today on Chinese social media. But probably Li Muha is going to run away with this unless he's lost all motivation to train. But yeah, that's really that's the only event I've seen in China going on this weekend. There's probably a couple guys like I used to put in like 1 or 2 events in Tapology for China a month. I know I bring this up all the time, but it is seriously like 3 or 4 every weekend now. And usually there's like 1 or 2 that I miss that I find the results for later. So yeah, it's going on all the time. I'm seeing new promotions pop up. I just saw another one announce their debut for September 2nd called Shanghai MMA Championship. So a lot of good gyms coming up in Shanghai. Dongjunga is one of them. A lot of good fighters there. Of course, the PI is there. And then got Dragon MMA, Animal MMA. A lot of good gyms in Shanghai. So, all right, let's get into your questions. It's only almost 20 minutes past the start of the podcast. So excited to get into questions. Really just hit me with whatever you got. But yeah, Kendris, you are always number one. Hey, I looked up some Bali MMA fighters and saw a very talented welterweight fighter named Mark Rahasya. What are your thoughts on him and his flashy style? Is good for 170 as a whole? Well, since we got the time today, let's just look him up all together, shall we? Okay. Let's just kind of do like a live prospect evaluation here. All right. So what I see, you 1-0. So you see that right away. Fighting out of Bali MMA. Beat another guy by split decision. Okay. One thing that I do want to point out is that Bali, that the events by Bali and which their promotion is Sanggu, or I don't know how to say that. Sanggu Fight Night, Sanggu, Canggu. But their promotion, Soma Fight, oftentimes not entered into fighter records. So his record could be incomplete. Willing to say that, but I'm not familiar with this guy, as he's just 1-0. So maybe I need to go and look him up. I will actually make a note of that and look him up, see if there's any videos on YouTube. Love checking out new prospects. But yeah, not much to go off of on here. Let me just see if he's got an Instagram. Not one that I can find. Maybe I'll do a little bit more digging, but appreciate that heads up. I'll keep looking on that. Are you familiar with Unwell Fight? Of course I am. Club that produced Yudong, Simadarji, Muslim Salikov as coach. They recently had a movie come out, and the gym owner is villainized for holding amateur fights for kids. But do you think the gym owner pulling kids out of poverty to do MMA is better than them staying in poverty? Uh, I don't know if that is a hot topic. The key issue here is child safety and how children are treated. I think that's really the question. And it's not really a fair comparison to ask what is better, a kid being in poverty or a child potentially being endangered. Uh, it's like pick your poison, when really the answer is children should be safe and feel safe and not be put into harm's way. So I've not watched the movie yet. I saw actually. I'm surprised that the owner is villainized in that movie because I've seen a lot of Umbull fighters posting about the movie. So if it's putting him in a bad light, that is surprising to me. Um, Children fighting in MMA has definitely been a hot topic. I don't think anyone has a problem with children training MMA as long as it's in a safe context and as long as they are not pushed beyond what they feel comfortable with. And children may have a hard time expressing or having the self-awareness to be able to tell someone who is a mentor and a coach no, which I think that is really the problem. And it's better to err on the safe side. In China, in general, this isn't just an unbull fight thing, but you see a lot more competitions between children promoted, which is always given me a little bit of a strange feeling in my stomach when I see children like cutting weight. I don't know what those practices are like, but looking at the camera and flexing, facing off, even though they're like heavily padded up, it's just kind of a weird feeling for me. I don't know if I can always put my finger on why. Maybe I'm totally wrong for that, and I'm just uneducated. But it is a lot more common in China for that to happen. So I don't think that it's. I honestly think that it's like Chinese MMA culture as a whole, and not necessarily just unbull fight. I think that there may need to be a little bit more investigation around what exactly is going on when we're, quote, pulling kids out of poverty. I want to be careful to turn people into heroes that are, quote, pulling people out of living conditions into presumably better living conditions. If someone is pulled, like, I realize some kids may truly be orphans and may be living in deplorable living conditions, but other kids have families. Whether or not they're treated well is another thing. Like in the U.S., and I know, like I have a lot of friends that are involved in the foster care system in the U.S., and I know that it's not a perfect system. Do not hear me say, well, in the U.S. we know how to do things. I'm not saying that, but like there is a difference between, like, if a kid is living in poverty, maybe even with potentially abusive situations with family, you can't just like pull a kid away from that. Like, a judge has to look at it. There has to be social workers involved. And there's kind of a hope of, like, if we can help the parents to get back to a more stable condition, like, we don't want to just, like, especially if someone is operating outside of the government, like, how much freedom do you have to just pull kids away from their family? I'm not accusing anyone of doing that, but those are just questions that I have when we're talking about, quote, pulling kids out of poverty. Who is deciding that these kids need to be pulled away from their living situation? Questions that I have. So I don't know who's the journalist to do this. I know there's been some reporting on this in the past, but I think it's probably about a decade old. So those are just questions I have. There may be nothing to it, and it may be situations where the kids' parents are sending their kids off with their blessing, and everyone's happy. This is all going great. So maybe nothing to see here, but those are just questions that I have. So I need to know more before I say one side is in the right or in the wrong. Yeah, mentioning training methods, would you compare it to someone online looking at different sources to learn about a field of study and look for different perspectives? Not one gym knows everything, but learning from different people every year has to be a sign of open-mindedness. At search for knowledge, right? And that's what that is the advantage that I'm highlighting her perspective has is the two schools are comparing someone intimately knowing you and knowing all of your tendencies and knowing everything about you to where they're able to give you the most pinpoint personalized feedback versus the strengths of having different looks and having lots of different kinds of input. What's the synthesis of the two? And that seems to be what Zhang Weili has achieved in her training methods. You mentioned looking online at different sources. And if you're talking about just like getting deep in the weeds on YouTube, even having maybe different seminars that you attend online or different training packages that you can buy, video courses online, definitely, I don't see any loss of a fighter doing that. I would just want to caution them that like hands-on coaching will never be a replacement, can never be replaced by simply watching videos. Mat time with someone who has your attention is always the best way, I think, to learn. So yeah, that's my opinion. Jimmy, you said that you don't consider yourself an analyst, which I respect. Do you find that analysts' perspectives like Mr. Slack or Lawrence Kenshin, I don't know who that is. So yeah, I don't know who Lawrence Kenshin, I'll make note of that as well. Very arrogant. Well, they know, Slack knows a lot more than I do about technique, so and I don't consume enough of his content to really be able to call him that. You've said before that Xiaonan doesn't pay attention to comments on social media. She made a Douyin post begging Chinese MMA fans to stop trolling or made all that stuff private. I don't remember saying that about her not looking at social media posts. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, so yeah, here's another interesting thing. What's your opinion on Weili practicing her walkout with booze, which she did that when she was training with Henry Cejudo in an audience. Fan made fun of her for doing that when she did it at Cejudo's. Yeah, but has embraced it. I saw an interview. I don't think it's a recent interview, but it was like one of those UFC connected things where Megan O'Leary hosts it, and then I don't think she interviewed Zhang Weili, but they did. Someone in China did like a feature and sent it to the UFC where they asked her about it, or maybe no. I think it was Zhang Weili's interview on MMA Hour, maybe 2 years ago or last year, maybe with when she was talking about that, and she said that her coach Tsai Shui Jun basically made her embrace all of like the social media negativity and just keep doing it until it no longer bothered her, which is so intense. Like, yeah, like when you have like a really upsetting situation, I don't know if I would recommend this as a head coach, but like earlier this week, I think it was at the Contender Series press conference, a reporter asked Dana about potentially providing free therapy to UFC fighters. I thought it was an excellent idea, assuming that not many fighters would probably take them up on that, and there's not much to lose, and how much that could have benefited fighters like, like McGregor, but also like Rousey, like John Jones, as they've worked through various elements of fame. And when you have a situation in a fighter's career that's really, really upsetting, how do you prevent that from just like putting a penny on the tracks of their career and setting them down at the bottom of the hill again, where they've got to work themselves up? I don't have a good answer to that. I think that therapy could be an option for that. Maybe not for everybody, but having it as an option, or at least giving it a try. What Zhang Wei Li's coach did is they basically just tried to inoculate her to it. And rather than like choosing like a therapy approach, they took the approach of just like, we're just gonna inject you with this criticism until the real thing has no effect on you. I don't know if that like thoroughly works. Does that mean that Zhang Wei Li is totally immune to criticism? It's like, is anybody totally immune to criticism, regardless of what they might say? I don't know. But her performances, she seems to have rebounded in her performances. Like her performance against Rose was pretty good. She would say that she wasn't like totally there. Her rematch with Rose, but overall, like fighting to a split decision when she got knocked out in the first minute of her last fight, pretty good. Obviously, a great performance against Joanna in the rematch, and then lights out performance against Carla Esparza. So obviously, it didn't seem to affect her negatively, and I think that it was probably her coach knowing her best. That's another advantage, I think, of having people around you that you've been with for a long time that are really committed to you. I kind of touched on the kids competing in competition. I think that it's obviously not against kids training in MMA, and think about like Taekwondo and karate and probably some forms of wrestling, some levels of wrestling. Kids get an opportunity to not just train, but compete. MMA is a little bit different just because like Taekwondo and karate does not have the, I know like most kids don't have the power to like end someone, but you know, as someone gets up into like their teens, 13, 14 years old, that starts to change a little bit, where a kid could actually inflict a lot of damage on another kid. I think that the refereeing is a little bit different, where they probably stop the fight much sooner. They're not going to let a kid's head get bashed in. But you know, Taekwondo, karate, those kinds of martial arts are they're more like single strikes, where someone's leaping in, landing a strike, as opposed to like a boxing combination. Do kids compete in boxing and Muay Thai? Yeah, they compete in Muay Thai. You see that in Thailand, where fighters also have much shorter careers. By the time they're teenagers, they may already have a couple hundred fights, but then they'll retire in their late 20s, early 30s. So a little bit shorter careers, sometimes even earlier, you'll see them retire. But yeah, I just think we need to be really careful when we're introducing so many more ways for children to hurt each other in MMA. We need to be really careful. I would love to see, I think that maybe an age limit or an age minimum of 13 years old, or, you know, have to be this tall to ride the ride. I don't know. It does make me a little bit uncomfortable seeing like 6 and 7 year olds fight each other. I think there's other ways that you can get kids experience, and there's other ways that you can teach kids discipline. and prepare them for higher levels of competition. But yeah, it's like we don't have the science on this. We don't know if a kid is competing in a cage in front of an audience at age 7, how does that affect their long-term career? We just don't know. So, like I said, kind of gives me a little bit of the willies. I'll see if I can find that movie. John Whaley does a 30-minute Q&A on Douyin. I have some troubles using Douyin. Sorry, just open the app here to see Miss Wang Song doing some shadow boxing, but yeah, so I can't actually log into Douyin because I don't have a Chinese phone number. Because of that, I don't follow anybody, and I just kind of have to like search for people. So using the app is a little bit tricky for me. I think rather than asking her a question, eventually someday I'd love to set up to do an interview with her. That would be really cool. Of course, I'd have a lot of questions for her. Probably shoot for something like that. Saying that Whaley is a minus 330 favorite against the most. Yeah, I'm surprised. I would think that it would be more. I've seen people in the betting community jump on the Lemos hype train just because of the odds and not due to how either fight. Yeah. I'm surprised by that too. Really surprised by that. Can you talk more about the Unwo Fight Club? Yeah, it's one of the oldest MMA gyms in China, and along with China Top Team, really one of the first MMA gyms to produce high level talent. I would say Longyun MMA as well has been around for a while, but yeah, Unwo and in China Top Team, some of the OGs of Chinese MMA. Black Tiger's been around since like 2012, 2013, but they are in Chengdu, China, which is southwest China. Chengdu, and I know this because I actually had plans to move to Chengdu and live there indefinitely. So I have always wanted to go there. It's one of the top places in the world that I want to visit. But so just west of Chengdu is a lot of mountains, and then you keep going, and you're basically like in Tibet. Tibet proper is like a ways west of Chengdu, but actual like cultural Tibet, where there's a lot of Tibetan people groups, live in all those mountains west of Chengdu. So that's why there's so many Tibetan fighters that you see going into places like Unwo Fight. And the controversy, which I don't really have like a stark opinion, kind of touched on that earlier in the podcast, but what they're known for is, quote, the Mr. Unwo will go and help bring kids out of poverty, not just Tibetan kids, but there are a lot of Tibetan fighters, and he will give them a free place to train, free place to live, and basically from a young age, they are fighting and training MMA. So that's why so many of their fighters are going pro at age 16. And then at like 20 years old, they're getting signed by the UFC. I think that's about how old, like when Rong Ju was signed, he's one of those guys. When Rong Ju was signed to the UFC, I think he was 20 years old. And I think at the time he was the youngest fighter on the UFC roster in some regards. So a lot of really, really young fighters. We haven't even really seen like thinking of the oldest fighter from Unwo Fight in the UFC, that's either Song Yadong or, which Song is not Tibetan, but that's either Song Yadong or Su Mudarji. Be the oldest guys, I think, that are in the UFC. But yeah, and then and some E fighters as well, spelled YI. That's another ethnic minority that's in that same area. There's a lot of fighters that train at Unwo Fight. It's a huge gym, tons and tons of fighters. You know the fighters like Rong Ju, Su Mudarji, who else? I'm blanking on other fighters. Ija, another one of those guys. Coming up, I would say Agulali. He's a featherweight fighter of the E minority. He is looking pretty good. Songlong Gushi, fighting, like I highlighted earlier in the podcast, fighting tomorrow in one championship. Who else is there? Li Yunfeng has had some pretty awesome knockouts. Let me actually just look them up on here. Let's look at these guys together. We got time. It runs so much slower when I'm doing this. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you all. I feel like I need to do a video on these guys. This would be, I think, really interesting. So Nika Dunn. He's a Tibetan guy. Fought in JCK a lot. Zalong Jashi, Tibetan guy, fights with one championship. Cho Lun, he has won 3 fights straight and is fighting in UAE Warriors later this month. Yong, a little bit of an older guy. Banma Duoji fights for one championship. Huang Yele, that's right, probably one of my top prospects out of China right now. He fights for WLF, and I don't know if he'll fight in UFC in the next year. Sounded like he was going to be with WLF for a while. Jinyu Shiye fighting with Road to UFC. He's pretty good. Young Lin fought for JCK. There's Agulali, really, really young kid. I think he's still a teenager, but he's 9-1. Tai Laka. I mean, all these guys. I mean, look at that. Mahashate fights the UFC. Li Yunfeng. List just goes on and on. Look at this guy, 7-0. Gushi Pengchu. He has a fight August 26th. I added that fight in here. Can't remember. Oh, that's with WKG. Lojo looked like a decent prospect. Has had a couple losses recently. Dega Shui, 5-0. Zhou Wang, he's a really fun fighter, fights with WKG. And then Lita Tongwu, he's another really good prospect at the UFC PI right now. Ruga Jun, also at the UFC PI. I mean, just look how deep this is. Another guy named Banban Doji, 3-0. This list is just so deep. I could keep going. I've heard of, even continuing down this list, I'm familiar with a handful of these guys. But yeah, the talent there is ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. All right. Whew. Talk about the class action lawsuit against the UFC. Oh boy, oh boy. I haven't yet. I don't know what your question is about it specifically. I'm not like the most qualified person about this to talk about this. And partially, you know, I've heard people that really know about this story are talking about how it could be it could be the biggest news story in MMA for years, but it's so like under the radar for almost every UFC fan. And I don't think it's necessarily because people don't care. I think that it's just kind of over people's heads. I'll admit, and some parts of it are over my head just because of all the legal terminology of it. I think that we really need people in the MMA media. And I know I'm in the MMA media, but like, it's not that I don't want to talk about it. It's just like really getting into the weeds of this it's not really like what I'm here for. Understand, I'm one guy that works for myself and I focus on Asian MMA. So I can't cover in all the with all the detail that I would like to about every single topic. But I think that we need someone in the MMA media to make this kind of content really, really digestible for casual MMA fans. It needs to be short. It needs to be clear. It needs to not just break down the legal jargon, but they need to, I would say, just like uh, try if they can to communicate it in very simple terms, and they need to communicate upfront very clearly how this could affect the UFC and how to track with that story. I think when people hear this, they hear about lawsuits, it just kind of flies over a lot of our heads, and I get that, and I don't fault MMA fans for that. Sometimes I like, for me, it takes a little bit of extra work to really understand it. I What I need to do is go over the judge's report, Judge Bulwar, that released his I don't know even what you call it, his report over the lawsuit where he is granting class certification. If I just have like a one sentence summary, I know a lot of you are probably just like, what are you talking about? A long time ago, a lot of former UFC fighters filed a lawsuit against the UFC saying that they had suppressed fighter wages, that they had engaged in unfair business, not only unfair, but illegal business practices that suppressed the competition of other MMA promotions, and that they had broken the law by doing so. And the reason why they care about that is because it has suppressed fighter wages, including their own. So that's what the lawsuit is about. What the judge recently decided. So a class, if I'm explaining this terribly, but a class action basically means that the lawsuit is not just against the whatever like dozen former UFC fighters that filed the complaint, but it's against all the UFC fighters in the time period that they're saying. So that massively changes things. If it was just these 12 fighters that had this lawsuit and they said, hey, the UFC suppressed our wages, we're mad about that, we want some compensation for that, then maybe they win that lawsuit, but the UFC pays them off. Nothing changes in the MMA industry. If it's a class action, then that means that I think it's like 1,200 UFC fighters that are included in this massive group. Then that's industry changing. That's going to change fighter contracts. That's going to change fighter pay. That's going to change just everything about the ecosystem, the MMA ecosystem. So that's one thing. And then the other side of it, which really isn't included about this, is the Ali Act. That's kind of the other like industry changing thing. That's a whole separate thing. And that is basically left up to Congress and US senators to debate and work out and present and try to pass that law. So that's kind of the two sides of things. But this is mainly about like fighter contracts and anti-competitive practices. And basically the judge came out this week and was like, essentially, I mean, nothing was like, there's no law that was changed this week, but in granting the class certification, the judge expressed his opinion that like, yeah, the UFC's lawyers' defense is pretty weak, and there's a very strong chance that the UFC is engaged in anti-competitive practices and suppressed fighter wages. So the next, what to look for next in this, I think August 21st is when the judge will give an update on the case. So that is in 11 days. We should get another update on the case of what's next. So I'm not telling you what you should think about that. If you search around on the internet, like on Twitter, you should be, John Nash is the guy on Twitter. He is the guy if you want to know everything about this. He is the leading MMA journalist that has covered this case and the economics of MMA ad nauseum. So hit him up, and you look through his tweets and you can find where he has linked the judge's opinion released earlier this week. So you may have to like for me, I have to read that stuff really slowly. Sometimes have to like Google things because there's some like legal jargon in there, but that's how I would go about it. Let's see. UFC PI just posted, oh yeah, I saw that, Zhang Weili walking out with booze on a recent post, so she's still doing it. Yeah, I think that's great. Are you able to share the average purse of one Pride fight night, or even share the purses of fighters you manage? No, because I don't know what one Pride pays their fighters. I really don't. So, yeah, I have no idea. So, an update with me on management. So, basically, I have taken a step back from managing fighters, and I made that decision about a month ago. And the reason I did that was not because of like drama or any kind of negative experience that I had with managing. I have nothing but good things to say about Yawara Sports. I have nothing but good things to say about the fighters that I managed. There was nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I am no longer managing fighters. Partially, like for me, it's all just like career moves for me. And for me, where I'm at right now, I'm at a place where just like to pull back the curtain and let you see. You all know that like MMA media is really not like a full-time job unless you're in like this top like 5% of MMA media. It's really not. And I knew that, but I sort of went all in with a lot of things in my career, probably a little bit too soon. And that was a lesson that I've had to learn the hard way, but it's a lesson that I've learned. And for me to be able to like make a full-time income, I basically like had to take a lot of pay cuts for a while, and I think I'm at a place where I need to reevaluate some things and shift where some time is going. So I've had to cut back a lot of things that I'm doing to focus on work that will make a full-time income. And unfortunately, one of those things has been management. That management company is awesome, and I, again, have nothing but good things to say about them. I would encourage fighters to give them a look if they're looking for management. I really would. But for me, I just had to take a step back. It like management also, unless you're like even for a lot of big firms, like I had a friend that got hired by a big management firm, and for him, like he wasn't making very much with it, and he also kind of had to like shift to step out of management to focus on making a full-time income. And that's not like anyone's fault, but it's just like that's just the way it is. And so for me, yeah, I just had to take a step back, even with like I am still extremely committed to MMA ecosystem, to growing that company, but I've had to really focus on things that are like, how do I make this business profitable as soon as possible, while still being able to work like another full-time job and pay the bills. So there's some things with MMA ecosystem that I don't do anymore. I also have taken a step back from writing for other publications. Like really all I do right now is MMA ecosystem and Tapology are the only things I'm doing right now. And not saying that's what it will be forever. My plan is to work full-time with something non-MMA related, so that I can invest back into the business, upgrade a lot of equipment that I used, put back some money, and then give myself more time to be able to switch to a full-time income. And I know that like I was on like a seminar today for other quote content creators in social media, and that's so normal. Like no one just switches full-time to start their own business and are full-time from day one. And I was probably a little bit optimistic about that, and a bit naive about that, but yeah. but we'll get there. Just have to play the long game for sure. I just don't want to be one of these like social media MMA media sites that goes big at first and then goes bankrupt and then you never see them again. So my hope is that MMA ecosystem is still here in 20 years. What do you think the fan reception will be at 292? Will she be booed or cheered? I think she'll be cheered. Yeah, I think she will. I think we're past that, and it's not in the South. What are your thoughts on the Thai government naming Lumpini Stadium fights as traditional Muay Thai to combat 1 4-ounce Muay Thai? I think that's accurate. I think that's, yeah. I think that's makes sense to me. It's not like Muay Thai is with the big gloves. Like Muay Thai is what it has always been. And when you change it to the 4-ounce gloves, like that's not a small rule change. That is a massive rule change. That changes how you throw a punch. That changes how you guard your face. And I think that it deserves to be called something different, for sure. Was I able to watch Wang Tsong's MMA fight? What is her potential beating Valentina in a kickboxing match? Doesn't really say much. I know it's like people will often. We saw this at Contender Series this week, where there's that guy. Forget the guy's name, but he fought. Now I'm not going to be able to. I gotta look up this guy's name. But yeah. He fought and they like made this big deal on the broadcast, like he has a win over Alex Pereira in kickboxing. Like, okay, yeah, there's a handful of people that have beat Alex Pereira in kickboxing, and he's also 1-2, right, against Pereira. They didn't really mention that much. Cesar Almeida, that's right. He has fought Pereira 3 times and is 1-2, and the most recent fight he lost against Pereira. So yeah, I think sometimes people can make kickboxing wins a little bit too big of a deal, and it's like this. Oh man, like they have a win in this other sport, so we should like shoot them up the ranks. And I realize people say that because of what happened with Alex Pereira in his career, and it was so long ago as well. But all that to say, her win in Dragon FC a couple weeks ago, she looked like a world beater. She looked like she fought someone that was way beneath her. Absolutely dismantled this young lady and finished her off with a head kick and ready for a massive step up in competition. Hopefully they can book her. I know there was talk about booking her with like kind of a mid-tier promotion, international promotion. So hopefully she can get fights as soon as possible. But yeah, I think that she has a lot of potential. No way to know that until she fights someone with like 10 fights under their record, honestly. Kendra's heard of China Top Team. Is Umbo older than that gym? Do you know which one is bigger at the moment? Umbo is definitely bigger. I don't know if there's a bigger gym in China than Umbo. It is that big. China Top Team is big, but it's like, I don't know how many people are showing up there. A lot. It's big, and they have a lot of really good fighters for sure. If you look at the JCK season, like a lot of the fighters that made it to the end of the JCK season are from China Top Team. So it's definitely a good gym as well. Umbo is just much bigger. Deep dive on Umbo would be very interesting. That would require from me probably that would take a little bit of time, but I think it could be worth my time for sure. Oh gosh, non-MMA related question. Do you prefer large salted soft pretzels or hard pretzels that come from a bag? Soft pretzels, for sure. Some hot cheese sauce, and my wife's just walking in right as I'm answering that question. So I I promise. Yeah, she's probably thinking that I've been talking about this the whole entire hour, but I have not. If y'all have ever been to like a mall in the U.S., you get this like there's like this smell and this sense of nostalgia. There's a pretzel shop in American malls called Auntie Anne's, and all they sell are giant soft pretzels. And there's like it's not just like salted ones with cheese, which those are really good, but they also have like all types of dessert pretzels as well. And if you've been to an American mall, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. Um, but yeah, that's the smell. That is the smell. Do I know how long the Migu deal is? I don't. I have been doing their workout vids. Oh, nice, with Whaley and Jinglong. Do you think it's a long-term deal, or do you think they'll switch broadcasters like the UFC does every 5 years? Yeah, the UFC has switched broadcasters with in China about every 5 years or so. They went from like Sohu to PPTV to Migu, and man, Migu is killing it. They are crushing. They are doing so well. I don't know enough about like Chinese broadcasting to know like is there a better fit out there? Like is there like the in the US they're on ESPN. Like is there an equivalent of that in China where it's like this is literally number one? Migu has given so much creative time to the UFC. I don't know. I feel like the UFC is probably pretty pleased with them, but as we know, usually when rights deals are up, the price of renegotiation also increases. So it could be on Migu to decide whether or not it's worth their time. I think that deal started in like what 20. Gosh, I did a freaking video on this where I talked about this. Was it 2019 that the Migu deal started or 2018? So if it's 5 years, it's got to be up pretty soon. That's another thing I should write down to do some like journalism into, is to see if it's up soon or if maybe they're even renegotiating now. Someone asked this on James Lynch and he didn't know. Ali Abdelaziz claims all his fighters are being ducked, but isn't it his job to get his fighters fights? If so, doesn't that make him bad at his job? So it's not the job of a manager to push fighters on the other side of the equation to sign. Don't have enough inside knowledge to know if that is true or not. You have to take into account a lot of the fighters that he manages, not all of them, definitely not all of them, but a lot of the fighters that he manages are really bad matchups for a lot of fighters. Umar Nurmagomedov, for example, probably has a hard time getting fights because he's ranked 13 in the bantamweight division, but he is a tough matchup for just about everybody. It's not on Ali Abdelaziz to get fighters on the other side to sign. So I don't know what else he could do to get other fighters to sign. Other fighters and his fighters are working off their current contracts. So it's not like he can raise how much other fighters are getting paid to fight his fighters. He does not have that kind of managerial power. So I don't know what else he could do to get other fighters to sign, honestly. What are your opinions on fighters coming into the cage after a potential opponent gets a win? Does it take away from the fighter who just fought? Yeah, a little bit. I think that if you're referring to like Juliana Pena trying to do that, I think that it is a little bit of a bad look. It takes away from fighters' wins, and it's not very classy, not very professional for sure. If there is an invitation or like thinking about, was it Daniel Cormier? Or forget which fight that was, if it was Cormier or Brock Lesnar that entered the cage, but I do like it if there's like a fighter forcing their way into the cage is a bad look. But if it's like fighter A won, and now they have a title shot against the champion. I think it's great, and I think that if the UFC can orchestrate that, it is good on them for promoting the fight. I really like that. When a fighter wins and automatically we get sort of a tease of the next fight. I don't mind that so much, but when it's a fighter that's just trying to push their way into the cage, I don't like that. What do I think of modern of MMA YouTube that focuses on hot takes and rumors and reaction videos to what people say? Well, I think before I was in the YouTube business and the social media business, I would have been frustrated with that, and I would probably be annoyed by it. Now, being in the social media world, I know why people do that, and I don't necessarily, unless they're just like historically bad takes or the bad kind of clickbait, then yeah, I don't like it, but I can understand it for sure. The thing is like, why do those videos get so many views? Because we keep clicking on them. If you don't like a kind of MMA media, then don't click on it. Don't read the article. Like, who is it? Like, it was from there's this old TV show called The Critic. It was like kind of like an adult cartoon about a movie critic. And he would always say, like, if we want movie studios to stop making bad movies, then stop going to them. So yeah, they make them because they do well, and YouTube monetize it. Like, if you're making your money from YouTube, when I'm sitting down to strategize videos that are going to push me towards 1,000 subscribers and monetization, I have to think about like doing a video that feels like I'm reading out of a textbook. Maybe that's really interesting to me. Like, guys, there are so many topics that are really, really interesting to me that I am not going to make a video about because it's going to get 50 views. Maybe that'll change someday. If those kind of those kind of videos interest you, then click on them, watch them, give them a thumbs up, share them. But the thing is just like, the MMA media is responding to the kinds of things that MMA fans click on. So that's why they do them. I saw, like, on James Lynch's channel, like, he does reaction videos to like Ariel Helwani versus Jamal Hill. I saw those, and I watched that. I gotta admit, like, I watched those videos, and I thought that his response to those videos was really well done, really professional, had really good insight. But why are other media members giving responses to other kinds of drama going on in this space? Because we click on them, because that's what we're telling MMA media that we want. So when I'm thinking of videos to produce, I'm not just trying to think of like, oh, what's a really hot take that I can invent that I don't really believe in. I'm trying to think through, like, what are my opinions that might be a little bit subversive that I feel like I can adequately defend, or what's something of value that I can give to MMA fans that isn't telling them something that they already know. That's what's really, really hard about MMA media, is standing out. So if you stand out, if you consistently provide good takes, then the algorithm's going to reward you for it. Fans are going to reward you for it. So that's just kind of the way the industry works, honestly. Traditional Muay Thai also has card shook with your hands are roped instead of big gloves. That's similar to 4 ounce. No. I don't. I think I kind of know what you're talking about, where they wrap hands with like a kind of rope. But yeah, they obviously don't do that with 4 ounce gloves. That's for sure. I'm on Migu, and it's pretty different to ESPN Plus, since they have personalized content for fighters, workouts, and interviews. I know, I agree. Like, if I'm comparing ESPN Plus to to Migu. Migu has done such a better job at like engaging fans. Which of the two platforms is really like engaging fans and inviting fans into something? ESPN will sometimes put out like little documentaries on fighters, but I feel like first of all, the app stinks. It's been around since 2018 or so, and it still stinks. Not many improvements have been made. It's really hard to find things. It's an app that is way too big, and because of that, it's like hard to find. Like for me to find UFC content, I have to click around so much. And it's like the video playback is clunky. There's very, very few options with video playback. And part of that's just because the app is just so big. It's encompassing every single sport. And so how can you really like specialize to the needs of MMA fans when you have golf on the same channel, you know? That's one advantage that UFC Fight Pass has, is that it's there for MMA content. And so it's just way easier to find things. So they really have not done a lot of improvements on it, even just like a lot of glitches. I still get a lot of glitches with ESPN Plus, where it seems like Migu, from what I understand, just they are just like connecting the fans a lot better, both in like the live content and pre-recorded content that they produce, but all the workout videos seem like, yeah, pulling fans in. I think they're doing a great job. Also referring to Adesanya doing that to Drakus. Oh, sure. Which in that situation, that was a tough situation, because for Drakus and Adesanya, I think even though that was a little bit awkward and ugly with some of the there was a lot of controversy around use of the N-word from Adesanya in that post-fight stare down. But Dana White went on air and said that the winner of this fight will fight Adesanya next in Australia. The problem was that they booked those fights 2 months apart, and the chances of Drakus getting injured after that fight with Robert Whittaker were extremely high, which he did. But they had already promised that Adesanya would main event this pay-per-view in Australia in just 2 months. So the turnaround time was too short. If they really wanted the winner of that fight to fight Adesanya, they would have drawn a hard line and told Australia, hey, the absolute soonest we can get over there is November or December. It was just a scheduling thing, where now it's like that post-fight cage stare down is a little bit awkward, and it's like, okay, now are we actually going to get this fight? We don't know, but I think it'll eventually happen. That was a well, what am I trying to say here? I think that was a good use of a post-fight in-cage stare down. Do you think ESPN Plus or Fight Pass should allow the Migu idea for engaging new fans? Well, it's just like, first of all, I don't think the UFC has a lot of control over the ESPN app because it's just so big. But I think that they could do that on Fight Pass for sure. I don't know why they haven't diversified the Fight Pass content a little bit more to like it's right there for them to create workout content led by fighters. Whereas like in China, they have a couple fighters that they can do that with. And I mean, they have hundreds of fighters that they could produce that kind of content for Fight Pass in English. They could use the UFC PI in Las Vegas for that. It's just right there. I don't know. Did I see that Josh Hinger's house got ransacked? Yeah, I did see that today. He lives in San Diego. Yeah, he's back in San Diego. And will he be able to corner Weili after such a horrible thing happened to him? Oh, that's a good question. I saw that he even said like they took so much stuff all the way down to like the coffee maker. Gosh, That is brutal. I don't know. He is a really good asset to Zhang Wei Li. And I know if that happened to me, even with my tiny apartment, I would have a hard time focusing for sure. So I don't know. I know that she does have. I'm not really sure what like Pedro Jordao, her BJJ coach from Black Tiger, is up to, but yeah, that is rough. That is rough. Hopefully they can figure it out soon, catch the guy, and hopefully they have insurance. But yeah, I'll be watching that for sure. Okay, appreciate it, guys. That was a fun batch of questions. You all gave me some fun ones today. So that is it for me. Next week, like I said, I will have. Oh, there you go. Makoto saying that Jordao is still in China. That's right. But yeah, hopefully tomorrow should have that video over Zhang Wei Li's training out. And then next week, hopefully a video on breaking down Zhang versus Lemos. So be on the lookout for that. Next week is fight week for Zhang Wei Li. Should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to watching that fight out of Boston. Hope you all have a great weekend. Enjoy the fights, the few that there are. But yeah, hope you enjoy them. Stay safe